Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday afternoon here at the offices of the Avalanche-Journal. I'm Don Williams. Alongside me is Carlos Silva Jr., and you've dialed up the AJ Media Red Raiders Facebook Live segment that we try to do each week. We got great response from folks out there last week on Texas Tech football. Red Raiders coming off a 47-27 loss to Mississippi in the season opener. They play Lamar 3 p.m. Saturday afternoon at Jones Stadium. We solicited your questions earlier this week, and you gave us a bunch of them, so we will try to run through them.
Well, like you said, Don, that's what took us so long to get there. You were kind of making sure you answered every question because you were a man of your word. So we have plenty of questions to start with, but I think the biggest topic that everyone's wondering about, and you wrote about it today in the newspaper if you picked it up on Wednesday, is, and I appreciate it, I didn't realize the headline up until I kind of actually read through it, but you got the jet in the hangar. Pretty good, and that being Jet Duffy.
People, that's kind of been one of the, it may be the hottest topic regarding Texas Tech football right now is after McLean Carter went down with a high ankle sprain, third series Saturday against Ole Miss, Alan Bowman came in and played the rest of the game. A lot of fans wondering why not Jet Duffy, and so we put that question to Cliff Kingsbury Tuesday in his weekly press conference, and Cliff said, one of the things was ball security with Jet has been an issue, and the other thing that he said was just game preparation, installing the game plan, understanding everything they're supposed to do has kind of been the other thing that he needs to get better at. And so I thought it was a pretty forthcoming answer from Cliff. But there were, let's see, we got a few more questions, though, on that subject, and Brent Miller asked, do you expect Jet to get a meaningful chance over the next 2 weeks, or does it sound to you like Cliff Kingsbury's mind is made up and that it's Bowman's job to lose?
I think right now, just based on at least the current landscape, you would think Bowman has a little bit of an up on this, but in a game against Lamar where you and I both agree this is a team that should get beat by Texas Tech. Texas Tech is more talented. They have a much better defense than they showed against Ole Miss. I think the one thing you want to look at with Texas Tech is, can you get to that level where it's like 40 to 50 point lead, then you can bring in Jet Duffy to see what he does in a game situation, because those are some things that Cliff Kingsbury always talks about. You can practice all you want, but the one thing you cannot mimic in practice is that game action, and that's what you want to see out of Jet Duffy or maybe anyone else that you're interested in. But right now, at least in terms of what Cliff Kingsbury is looking for, and we've kind of mentioned it, you kind of mentioned it in your story as well, don't turn the ball over, make sure you have a handle of the offense, and you prepare each game like you're going to start.
Yeah, and I want to maybe differentiate here, because Cliff has not said that it's Alan Bowman's job to lose, and he's not said that it's Bowman's job going forward. What he said is that he is confident in both of them.
Yes.
Now, here's my personal belief, and this is just from 32 years of covering college football.
Yeah.
The way this looks to me is that Alan Bowman is the guy.
Yeah.
And to answer Brent's question, do I expect Jet to get meaningful chance over the next 2 weeks? I don't expect to see a lot of Jet Duffy over the next 2 weeks, if we see him at all. And here's the reason why. I think you have a true freshman that may be your quarterback for an extended period of time, and I think every rep, every snap that he gets is valuable, especially when you consider not only is he new to the offense, but the receivers, with the exception maybe of T.J. Vasher, are largely new to this offense and to working with your quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the way an offensive coach looks at it is, I need those guys working together, repping as much as possible, because Houston's going to be a tough game next week, and then the Big 12 is here with Oklahoma State. So I may be completely off base here, because this is not really what Cliff Kingsbury said. Cliff Kingsbury said, they're close and he feels good about both of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's pretty telling to me that Bowman played the duration on Saturday, held his own, didn't commit a turnover, and Cliff has said, harped on on ball protection as the biggest reason that he's going to go with a quarterback this year. So I think it's going to be Bowman unless he really messes up.
And let's just keep in mind, too, that McLean Carter's not out of the situation either. He's got a high ankle sprain, of course. Kind of mentioned this in the podcast. You can check that out on Omni. We'll be putting that out on the Red Raiders Twitter as well, along with Facebook. You just saw that on the Twitter and Facebook feeds as well. But he's got a high ankle sprain, may be out for a couple weeks to obviously make sure that you're back. Again, at that point, you never know. Maybe Bowman will kind of cement himself as the starter at that point. But the fact that Cliff Kingsbury went with McLean Carter showed that he had an understanding of the offense, didn't have the highs and lows that you get out of maybe some younger guys like an Alan Bowman or a Jet Duffy. So he certainly showed some credentials that made Cliff Kingsbury feel like he could start. It's just an unfortunate deal where he got rolled in a tackle, like you said, in that first play of the third series, and has been out, or will be out, pardon me, with that high ankle sprain. And we'll see how long he goes out with it, because, I mean, just the way it looked where he couldn't put any pressure on it after he kind of came out of the game, it's never a good look.
Yeah, and that leads into our next maybe kind of question, and that is, how long is McLean Carter going to be out? Chiloy Wong, and I hope I didn't butcher the name, and I probably did, but I appreciate the question and the participation. And the question is, with Cliff's and the coaching staff's jobs on the line, are they putting all their hopes on a true freshman, not buying that Carter will be a game-time decision, and not being a doctor here, but the healing time on a high ankle sprain is usually 4 to 6 weeks. And I agree with that. I think that a more realistic time frame for McLean Carter to be back is sometime in October. I think it's and again, this is just me talking here, but if you tell me it's a high ankle sprain and I go to webmd.com or those sites and they say this is a pretty serious injury and it usually takes weeks and weeks to heal, sometimes even longer than that 4 to 6 week time frame, I'm kind of going on the high end, and I think I think personally McLean Carter's questionable to even be ready by the time Big 12 play gets here in about 3 weeks. I sure don't expect to see him Saturday, and I really don't expect to see him next Saturday either.
Well, of course, the one good thing for you, Don, and as well as everyone else, if it's on the internet, it is true. So, of course,
hey, I was looking at least at reputable medical websites.
Yes. Yeah, so it wasn't a wiki WebMD or something like that. But the one thing that you can take away from Cliff Kingsbury when he did talk about it Sunday, when you're driving back from Houston, he said it's a tolerance deal for McLean Carter. So it might be a deal where maybe he's able to kind of tape it up and see what he does with it. You may see him get maybe a couple reps. You never know. Of course, like I said, I'm trying to kind of infer some things that the small little things that you get out of Kingsbury or any of the players. But I think some other important guys that could potentially see some time in that game, or maybe a Deshaun Johnson who's still dealing with the shoulder injury. He could be a guy that maybe you just get some reps in with him. I'm not sure you would. I think you'd rather hold him out for another week, make sure he's 100%, because that's something that Coach Kingsbury's done, at least at a consistent basis. And I'm sure it's frustrating for you and I because we're trying to get some answers out of him. But the one thing he does do is when the players get back on the field, they're close to about 100% as you can get. And that's another guy that I think you mentioned him last time, but Lonzel Gilmore's another guy that's been held out.
Yeah, well, and Lonzel had shoulder surgery in the offseason. He had knee surgery in the offseason, and so he's working back. I think he got into the game a little bit on Saturday. It's just been a lot of rehab for him to do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. One more Jet Duffy question, then we'll move on to some other subjects.
Okay.
Shakes Zorro asked, I watched the Jet play in high school and turnovers weren't an issue, so I'm throw the ball away when the pass or the run was not there. He always seemed to make good decisions with the ball. NCAA football is a big step up from high school. Maybe he's pressing in practice and real game action might solve this. Possibly. I mean, you have some guys who are bad gamers and some guys who are bad practice players. I think the scary thing, though, is this is not a prolific Texas Tech offense. There's more questions about your passing game than there's been really since the first Mike Leach year, I believe. And so Cliff Kingsbury's, again, said that it's essential that whoever plays quarterback does not turn the football over. And I think he saw Jet Duffy maybe turn the football over at a pretty alarming rate in the spring and again in August. Remember a couple of weeks ago when they sent out those highlights from the inter-squad scrimmage, they sent out 7 plays, and 2 of them were Jet Duffy being intercepted. And I think Cliff feels like we can't afford to take that risk, and you at least have to put up a 0 in the turnover column.
Well, here's the other thing, too, is when you put that 0 in the turnover column, as we kind of mentioned in the podcast as well, you're not putting yourselves behind in terms of giving the other team a chance to score, which is what happened with Ole Miss. You got behind so much you couldn't rely on that running game, and at times it looked like Texas Tech was running when they shouldn't. Cliff Kingsbury mentioned he did that because he didn't want to put too much on Alan Bowman early. I mean, it's a true freshman. Yes, he was there for a semester because he got straight out of Grapevine and then, of course, got to college in Texas Tech. He was fortunate to where he was able to get that semester to get bigger, faster, stronger, as Cliff Kingsbury always talks about. But the biggest thing is he was able to immerse himself into the game plan and kind of all the small little intricacies of the offense. So I think that helped him understand it a little bit, along with having that spread offense at Grapevine. Yes, there were different terms, but I think certainly he has shown the it factor, as you've kind of mentioned. I mean, he just has guys gravitate toward him, and I think that helped him a little bit. But I think we'll see maybe the next step in this second game, because you're going to play a Lamar team that will be obviously playing at a high level for themselves, but it's a team that you can certainly take your lumps with a little bit more and probably get something more out of your offense and your defense.
Robert Powell has a couple questions for us. Robert says, T.J. Vasher only caught 5 passes on Saturday. I think it's 4, actually. Anyhow, was Ole Miss doubling him to control him? He needs to become the number 1 wide receiver, and Cliff needs to devise ways to get him the ball even when doubled.
The old Wednesday morning quarterback.
I don't think they were really double teaming him to any real meaningful degree, or double teaming him a lot, especially with him being there on the outside.
Yeah.
I think T.J. Vasher is going to get a lot of passes thrown his way, mainly because he's kind of like what Mike Leach used to say. Because he's 6'5.5".
Yeah,
he's always open, and you can throw the ball up there at about 10 feet. And T.J. Vasher's the only guy who's going to get it. I think here's the other thing is, the Tech offense is always one of the big facets of it. Is it's always depended on, or it's always run most efficiently when you've spread the ball around, gotten a lot of throws to the H, to the Y, to the Z, and they had pretty good balance on Saturday. I thought you had Zach Austin caught 4 passes. Jadion High caught 4 or 5 passes.
Caught 4.
And
I actually have the stats in front of me if you want.
Oh, okay, yeah. So help me out there, Carlos.
So T.J. Vasher had 4 catches, 66 yards. Antoine Wesley had 6 catches, 65 yards. Jadion High had 4 catches for 62 yards. And then it goes a little bit lower with Kashawn Carter, the freshman. He had 4 for 35. Zach Austin had 3 for 27. Trey King, of course, a running back, 4 for 23. Dalton Rigdon, the last wide receiver, so to speak, had 2 for 19, and Seth Collins, the other wide receiver / kind of athletic, I guess, talent that you have, he had 1 for 7, and then, of course, the one really tough penalty on himself that kind of put Tech in a bad way. But I know you talk about the balance with the receivers, and you certainly see that with the numbers, but the one thing I think that they were missing, minus that SportsCenter top 10 play from T.J. Vasher, was the big play. I think that's what they were missing. They didn't have that stretch the defense play, and I think that's what kind of hurt them a little bit.
Yeah, and the thing about that is, I don't know that they have that guy unless it is Kashawn Carter, because Vasher's not a real speed guy. He has long strides, but he's not a real fast runner. Antoine Wesley, who had that 6 for 65, who I thought he had a nice game too, not really a speed guy. Neither are Zach Austin and Jadion High. I think the question is Kashawn Carter, the 2-time state champion sprinter down at the Woodlands, who ran a 10:22 in Austin in May. Can he become that guy? Can he become like a Jakeem Grant guy? Because he's a guy, if they give him in space, give him in the open field, it's probably going to be 6 points, because he will outrun most anybody on a football field. That's going to be the question.
Well, we got a couple questions now in the chat, so we'll kind of start with those, and then if they kind of check off some marks with you, Don, feel free to let me know. But Connor Davis wants to know, why was Texas Tech even a slight favorite against Ole Miss?
Two teams that had both won 6 games the year before. So pretty much
Neutral site game.
Neutral site game. Probably expected it to be a little bit more of a Texas Tech crowd than an Ole Miss crowd.
Yeah.
Ole Miss last year was a really bad defensive team, particularly against the run.
Yeah.
And they were also a not good offensive team with the run. They were ranked number 103 in the nation in rushing offense, and rushing defense, I want to say, was 123.
It was pretty bad.
So they were a team that, outside of those receivers and some experience on the offensive line and some experience in the secondary, they were not a real highly regarded football team themselves. They also lost a pretty good punter, pretty good kicker. So they had about as many question marks as Texas Tech did. And I think probably another factor went into that, and this is something that maybe people overrated, maybe you and I overrated, is the Texas Tech defense.
Yeah.
Everyone expected them to be better, and then they give up 546 yards.
Well, it was coming in hyped, as you kind of mentioned in your gamer, and of course they got a little bit humbled as Broderick Washington and some of the other guys we spoke to, Eli Howard, kind of mentioned it was a game they needed, to where they realized if they don't execute, play like they should, they're going to get beat like that and get kind of run over, if you will, with the 204 rushing performance from Scotty Phillips at JUCO. He was a newcomer to Ole Miss. He was a guy that maybe you weren't expecting that big game out of, but when you have a big game like that, that really kind of hurts you, puts you in a bad spot, and that's what Texas Tech was in, as they lost 47-27. This one more of a comment from Rob BC III. Wednesday morning quarterback, did he just really say that? Yes, I did. It's a joke. I'm trying to make people laugh. It's a chat. It's not a be serious type thing. But Connor Davis has a question. Will we see Eric Ezukanma, I believe that's how it's pronounced, I apologize if I said that wrong, this year, or will he redshirt?
He played a little bit at the end of the game on Saturday. He was in on the last drive. I think he caught one pass, didn't he? I think he caught one pass right there in the last minute of the game.
I can look that up. He had one for 4 yards.
Yeah, he got a pass right there at the end. That's what I was thinking. I think he's the kind of guy, and it's so different this year because they have that new red shirt rule. Used to you play one snap, that's
you're done.
You're not redshirting if you play one snap. Now they have the rule where any player can play as many as 4 games and retain the red shirt. So I think a lot of these decisions will kind of be made.
That's why we're live.
I think a lot of these decisions will kind of be made as we go over the first month of the season. If guys play a little bit in the first few games and they show some progress, then maybe they're less apt to redshirt. If they look like they need more time, then they'll keep the red shirt on them after that 4-game threshold. But he's a guy that they really like a lot, and he has a ton of ability. Right now he's behind Antoine Wesley and trying to remember who the second X is. He's playing that X outside receiver position behind. I should have kept my I should have brought my release.
That's my fault. There you go. You got it right there. And then, of course, we'll talk about some other guys as well that kind of stepped in there that were freshmen. Of course, DeLeon Ward had himself a day. He had the 17 carries for 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. Of course, he's a guy that was trying to get back into the offense after some off-the-field issues to focus on academics. Done everything like Coach Kingsbury and the coaching staff has asked, and he certainly enjoyed his time. I know some of his teammates were very complimentary and saying like they were just happy just to see him succeed after all the work that he's done to get back into the offense and just back onto the field. But some other freshmen, I know we talked about Ezukanma. He had 1 for 4. Tajon Henry, a guy, at least in the backfield, he had 1 catch for a yard. I know that's maybe something you can look at, a change-up. So Roderick Thompson is another guy.
So Thompson didn't play, and I expect him to redshirt. I don't think there's going to be playing time there for him.
Yeah. Well, one guy that we didn't see that much about, and I know I've kind of been mentioning it, but DeMarcus Felton, I thought he might be getting a few more carries. We'll see how that kind of turns out. But I think DeLeon, as we've mentioned,
DeLeon's going to be the guy.
Main one. Yeah.
And then I think it's just kind of week to week on whether if feel like King looks better or Felton looks better and how they do. I think a lot of that will be determined on how they do in other aspects besides carrying the football. It'll be pass protection, blocking, those sorts of things. Going back to what Connor asked about Eric Ezukanma, he's behind Antoine Wesley and Daquan Bowman. So I think Ezukanma's situation will be if he develops to the point where he's clearly better than one or both of those guys, he'll play. If he doesn't, then I think they keep the red shirt on him after that 4-game window.
And then, of course, that's the key is you have those 4 games to maybe put someone in and see how they react to that game action. That's one of the interesting parts, and I know David Gibbs had mentioned it when it was brought up to him about that four-game redshirt rule. Is it puts the competition at a higher level when you're at practice, because guys aren't necessarily thinking, oh, I'm going to redshirt. You have a chance to get some playing time this year with that redshirt rule, and I think that's big. Let's go to let's see here, Gerald Malcook. I apologize if I'm saying these wrong. I'm terrible at names, but we're live. He's asking, after rewatching the game, it seemed that Bowman was either not ready or allowed to check into other plays. I mean, I'm pretty sure I can easily kind of take the words out of your mouth, but he's a true freshman. You don't want to put too much on him, right?
I thought he did pretty well in terms of for being a true freshman who was not expecting to play in that game, because I think they're expecting to play McLean Carter the whole way, start to finish, and so. So the situation you have there is McLean Carter probably got 2/3 of the reps last week in practice, at least 2/3, if not more, maybe 3/4, maybe 80%. That's kind of the norm for your starting quarterback in game preparation. And Cliff Kingsbury said the other reps were split between Alan Bowman and Jet Duffy. Mm-hmm. So Bowman probably did not get he didn't get a whole lot of reps last week with the game plan. And that being the case, I think to complete 29 passes and not turn the ball over, I think was pretty good for a first outing.
No, absolutely, I agree with that. And then next one, Bowman could have done a lot worse. Captain Obvious, according to Michael Metcalf. I think that's more of a comment than anything. Robert Granfeld, who we both know. 3 offensive big plays by Mississippi for touchdowns. Does that matter? Any positive for the defense? I think the biggest positive is they played hard. That's really what David Gibbs kind of mentioned to all the players. They played hard.
Yeah, a couple of players said that. They were asked yesterday, what was the bright spot on the defense, and 2 players said David Gibbs felt like the effort was there. But man, and I said this yesterday on our podcast. Oklahoma rolled it up against Tech last year, but Oklahoma rolled it up against everybody. That was the poorest defensive performance I've seen out of Tech since 2016. I did not expect it. And to give up 3 touchdowns where the 3 players who scored the long touchdowns basically were untouched, I thought was just disaster. I mean, you get the pass that you give up to begin with, and folks have said that DeMarcus Fields fell down. Well, he was beaten before he fell down. Yeah. He fell down when he was trying to recover. Mm-hmm. And then your front 7 just gave you no chance on the 2 touchdown runs by Scotty Phillips. Mm-hmm. The safeties were the guys who wound up looking bad, and the announcers can say, Thomas Leggett's got to make that play. John Bonney's got to make that tackle. But, you're one-on-one in the open field against a 210-pound guy with as much speed as you have. Your defensive line or your linebackers have got to get a hand on him.
Or at least slow him down.
Got to slow him down to give you a chance.
Here's the other thing too: is when you got the safety like that, you have to give him a chance to get an angle at him, because that's the other thing is, if you're having to react, more than likely you're going to probably get beat on one of those plays if you're reacting compared to you are obviously making the aggressive play, which unfortunately Thomas Leggett and John Bonney weren't able to do, as we saw in the game. Next thing from Connor Davis, not sure if this is anything that's you've got here, Don. Do you think Tech still might be able to beat Oklahoma State this year? I know it's a little bit looking forward. 2 games from now after Lamar and Houston, they're going to go to Stillwater. We talked about it. They lost a lot of talent from last year, Mason Rudolph, and, of course, James Washington as well, the wide receiver as well. They both went to the NFL, so interested to kind of get your thoughts on that as Connor Davis.
Well, that's one of the things that I said preseason. I think if Tech is going to end the 9-year losing streak, I believe it is now, against Oklahoma State.
There's a lot of streaks.
This is the year. And to answer the question, I think Tech can win in Stillwater this year, and the reason why is, like you said, Rudolph, third-team All-American, gone. Washington, Blenkoff Award winner, gone. Two real veteran safeties, and Ramon Richards and Trey Flowers, gone. They lost about 3 or 4 guys off the offensive line that have a ton of experience. Like they're playing a quarterback that's brand new. He's not actually brand new. He's a 6th-year senior, the Cornelius kid from Randall, I think, or Bushland. I forget which.
I believe
Panhandle
it's Bushland.
kid, Taylor Cornelius.
I'm pretty sure it's Bushland, and I'm sure I'm going to hear about it from Kale and Lance said I can't remember that, but I'm sure he's from Bushland.
So yeah, I think Oklahoma State is working through its own issues, same way you are, and so I think Tech does have a chance to win at Stillwater. Actually, probably a better chance than you've had several times over the last decade. I got a couple. Let's see.
Feel free. We have one about punting and some looking at Lamar and UH, unless you got something that you kind of want to get off the chest. Because I know, like you said, you were searching through Twitter, kind of everyone that kind of got to you, and I know you want to get through these. So let's try and get this quick, because Brad wants us to finish.
A few more quick ones.
He doesn't.
Gilbert Herrera asking the fans to bring in paper sack masks. Gilbert, I think that's a violation of the clear bag policy. So
there you go, the jokes. You know, you gotta keep it light, right?
Actually, that would be interesting if you tried to bring in a paper sack mask. I think they would confiscate it because it's not a clear bag.
Do they confiscate signs? Because technically, it's a sign, I guess.
No, it's not a sign. We're talking about a brown paper sack that people put over their heads.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess they could.
I mean, there's nothing in it.
You know, they could probably look in the sack. I assume so. Like they check our bags as we go in. So I guess maybe you could bring in a paper sack.
It's a good question, and I guess a funny answer from you.
Rectorator asked, does Clemson score more points this weekend, or does Lamar? Clemson plays the Aggies at Kyle Field. Lamar playing here against Texas Tech. Last week, Lamar beat Kentucky Christian 70-7. Clemson beat Furman 48-7. Serious answer, Rectorator. I think Clemson will score more points this weekend than Lamar.
Yeah.
If Tech gives up more than 20 points to Lamar, that will be not good.
Yeah.
Especially if it happened. Well, maybe if they get a couple of garbage time touchdowns against deep backups.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing, too. I know for those that aren't aware, Lamar did score 70 points. Now, granted, it was against Kentucky Christian, who I'd never heard of up until you mentioned him to me on the podcast. So, I mean, it's just one of those deals where you have the names like an Ole Miss and a Kentucky Christian / Lamar, where you have to make sure that you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. And I think this is a team that they're supposed to beat. I think that's the most important thing. What else you got, Don?
I think
we're actually getting a couple here. People are
going Tim L-E-L-O fan. Across a moment ago, you touched on Seth Collins' taunting penalty. Tim asked, please ask Cliff to address why, after all these years, players can't seem to get through a game without getting senseless personal foul penalties. Is there no punishment for a player during the next week if they get a penalty such as taunting?
I'm sure
there always has been.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's it can be rolling, it can be extra sprint stuff, it can be showing up at 5 a.m. to do stuff with the strength and conditioning staff. So pretty sure that there are ramifications for penalties that are committed. I think what you have now is, though, the culture of football really at all levels is trash talking and taunting and look at me and showboating.
It's a physical game. Like, people forget that. Like, it's one of those deals where you're trying to be better than the other person, and you have to somehow get an advantage, whether that's a big hit, whether, like you said, that's kind of talking trash or something.
Well, here's the thing. I want to differentiate between, like, targeting penalties and taunting penalties.
Yes.
To me, the taunting penalties are inexcusable. Seth Collins taking you from having the ball at the 2-yard line to having the ball at the 17-yard line with a taunting penalty. But it's the culture now of I'm trying to think how to put this into words. Having to get up and do something with a strength and conditioning staff at 5 a.m. on Monday Tuesday is easier for me to take than not showing bravado, because in this day and age, football players pride themselves on showing bravado and trash talking and taunting. And to me, again, it's inexcusable. Now, I'll differentiate that from targeting, and I'm one of the few people who kind of gives Des Smith a pass on the targeting penalty that he had that got him ejected from the game in the first quarter. I thought he's trying to make a hustling play. There's a receiver who's open. Yep. The pass glances off the receiver's hands or goes just past him. And Des Smith, you're supposed to go. They want you to go from 90 miles an hour to 0 in 2 steps.
And you're assuming that the ball isn't coming at you either, because he doesn't know where the ball is.
Yeah.
He doesn't know.
He was running with his back to the ball. So, was that a costly penalty? Yeah, because it cost you a starting cornerback.
When you're already hurting.
When you're already hurting.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of sympathetic to Des Smith in that situation. I understand the rule. I understand the purpose of it. But I think you're playing big-time college football. You got to play it at high speed. You got to be hustling. And Des Smith is going to be criticized more if he gives up a big play to DeMarcus Lodge because he's pulling up to not get a taunting penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Or, pardon me, to not get a targeting penalty.
Yeah. Well, I know that was last week. Let's get into some questions that are about this week. Carol McCole-Atler. Once again, I apologize. I'm terrible at names. But what's the status of the punter? Will they open the position? This was a question, yes. Coach Kingsbury about Dominic Panazzolo. Had one, I want to say it was an 11-yard punt, which wasn't good.
Yep.
And I believe he averaged about 34 yards per punt.
Correct.
And certainly not what you were expecting from a guy that could, at least from what I remember, at least from stuff I wrote and just kind of watching film, where the guy was booting 60-yard punts.
Well, you know,
some, yeah.
But, you know, you look at it, he averaged 35 yards a punt his freshman year at Snow College, and he averaged 41.4, his 41.7 his sophomore year at Snow College. He's pretty much been the guy that they recruited.
Yeah.
I think what they were hoping for was he could kick it 40 and then make it roll 20. And we've seen the big rolls out of Dominic Panazzolo. He had one that went 72 last year. The aggravating thing with him, though, is he, whether it's a mechanics thing, technique, he has, he shanks the ball too frequently. And Cliff said it's happening too often, and he was thinking about changing punters, going to door, looking behind door number 2.
Well, at least having a competition. I mean, obviously, we'll say that much is kind of what he alluded to. Did have one
and they brought in, I was going to say real quick, Reed Bowman, they brought in a junior college transfer from Blinn College. He would be the other guy. Cliff said that they'll both get reps this week and then kind of decide.
So he had one fair catch. Of course, Ole Miss had 2 inside the 20. I think that's what you're kind of looking for, is trying to pin the offense back and, of course, let your defense kind of do its work. They were not able to do that with some of those punts that Panazzolo did have. We'll get to another question that kind of revolves around the stuff that's coming up here as I kind of go up on this comment. We're actually getting a bunch of comments now. Can we legitimately expect to learn anything about our team against Lamar, or do we have to wait until the UH game, says Tom Jacobs?
And that's good, because Robert asked nearly an identical question. Robert said, what has to happen versus Lamar for you to really believe that the defense has made vast improvements from last year?
Keep it under 20.
Well, here's the thing. Here's my answer real quick. There's nothing that's going to happen this week that versus Lamar that's going to make you think differently of the defense or make you learn anything. Because Lamar's simply not good enough. They were a 2-10 team last year at the FCS level. So if Texas Tech wins this game 77-0, that doesn't really change what happened last week against Ole Miss, which is the more meaningful game.
Well, you'll kind of like this. Merva Skurlark is in the chat.
Former Tech player, the Hammer.
There you go. So he's in there. So let's see here. Is Octavius Morgan getting a medical red shirt, says Connor Davis? I mean, I'd have to assume he has. Or at least they're looking into it.
That's something that probably won't be determined until after the season.
Yeah.
But assuming that he is out for the year, that would be an option that's available to him to get a medical hardship waiver or the 6th year of eligibility. That's assuming, again, of course, that he doesn't play this year, and there's no reason to think that he is going to. Then it kind of is up to him. Does he want to come back and play another year? Or, depending on where he is in school, I'm not sure where he is in terms of graduating. Does he want to or does he not? So it's kind of his call. Do you want to come back? If so, they'll begin the process probably after the season to get your year back.
One quick comment, and then we can get to some of the questions you got. 10 starters back from a weak defense yields a weak defense. We're just not improving, says Gerald Wiles. I mean, they were improving at least later down in the year. They created turnovers. I think that's what can mask a few things, if you will. I think the one thing that you will look at this week is maybe how the secondary works out. Maybe you have a Deshaun Johnson back. Maybe you don't have as many one-on-one plays because your defensive line and your linebackers are kind of getting in their alleys, getting in the blocks, taking up blocks so that there are angles for them to get after and they're not going one-on-one again. I think that's kind of my short answer and execution to see if the Texas Tech defense is a little bit better. But I think if you keep it under 20, I think that's at least a good sign for Texas Tech.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. They're better. I mean, physically they're better.
They're bigger.
They're bigger. They're more talented. They were more talented in 2017 than they were. More talented and experienced in 2017 than they were in 2016, or really most of this decade. And that was proven by the numbers. They gave up 11 points a game fewer last year than the year before, and they gave up 110 yards fewer last year per game than the year before. That doesn't happen by accident. That's improvement. I think that's the alarming thing then, is that these are the same guys, and there's no reason for them to have busts, and there's no reason for them not to there's no reason for them to really get manhandled because of your talent level and the experience. I think that again, that's the alarming thing, is that's inexplicable for that group of guys to play as poorly as they did last week.
We'll get to some of your questions if you want to get to them. We have Michael Metcalf, who's signing out, says thanks to us and the Claytonville Flash. I don't know if you've heard that one.
Mike is a friend of mine from Tulia High School.
That he is.
Thanks, Mike.
So there you go, Claytonville Flash. But obviously you got a bunch of questions.
That's me, by the way.
Yeah, of course. I'm certainly not Flash.
I'm from Claytonville. You can be Flash.
There you go. I doubt I'm Flash.
I think we've actually scrolled through pretty much all of mine, unless we got any late one. I tell you, I'll throw one out. Here's something else that people have talked about and asked about. Into the first half on Saturday, Ole Miss kicks off. You get the ball back with 30 seconds left, and Cliff Kingsbury kneels. And there was some booing in the stadium when that happened. Mm-hmm. What do you do there, Carlos, if you're a head coach or offensive coordinator? If you're a head coach making the call,
you're gonna have to.
You got 30. It was right at 30 seconds, and you had the ball. I don't remember exactly, but it's roughly 25, 30-yard line.
Talking Kansas game.
No, I'm talking last week's game against Ole Miss.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get a bunch of stuff here.
Yeah.
Kind of lost
track. Kickoff.
Yeah, kickoff.
Tech fields the kickoff. Tech gets the ball back, 30 seconds left in the first half. Mm-hmm. And Cliff Kingsbury elects to kneel down instead of trying to hit a big play or something and get into field goal range.
Well, here's the thing. It almost comes back and is little bit mirrors the Kansas State game last year, where everyone was wondering, well, why didn't you try and go down the field with Nick Shimanek? You had a timeout, all those things. Cliff Kingsbury's mentioned he wants to make sure that you don't put yourself in a bad situation, because what if, you have a true freshman and a quarterback. He throws an interception. They get a potential field goal out of it or even a touchdown. You don't want to get yourself in a worse position, which even at that time, I want to say it was 30 to 17.
30 to 17.
Yeah, 30 to 17. That's at least 2 scores away, and not only that, but you get the ball back at halftime, so you can potentially cut that in half to one possession if you're able to score out of the halftime break. I think.
I was going to say maybe you throw a deep pass to T.J. Vasher since you've seen that you could hit that you have the physical advantage. But I'm not really one to harshly criticize that, because about half your coaches in that situation would have done the same thing.
No, I agree. And here's the thing: is you can call it conservative, do it whatever you want. You were only down two scores, and you get the ball back. Maybe you think about it, if you're down 2 scores and you don't get the ball back, maybe, because no matter what, you're going to be down by 2 scores after halftime, but at least you had the potential to cut it in half had you scored out of halftime. Of course they didn't, and of course we kind of saw what happened there. But I think you try and use the information you're given, which I'm sure Cliff Kingsbury thought about it. I'm sure Kevin Johns had his input, which I thought was kind of interesting to see the running game at least a little efficient. I thought that was at least a positive for the offense. You got DeLeon Ward going, of course. You got Trey King going. And I think if you're able to get into a position where you're ahead and you start getting those 4 to 5 yards, you start milking clock, which you weren't able to do last year. And that's going to be the difference in this offense. It's not going to be these maybe big plays that you're expecting every other play. You kind of pick and choose when you have those play action passes, and I think that's going to be the difference in this offense.
I've run through all of my questions. Carlos, you got anything else?
I got something in my email. Do you really think there's that big of a gap between the 3 quarterbacks as far as talent, according to Bobby Billstone?
As far as talent, I don't think so. I think it's all about who's able to execute the offense. I think a lot of it has to do with some of the more subtle things, like getting your offense into the right play, your pre-snap reads, seeing what the defense is going to do.
Yeah.
I think some of his preparation during the week. Who do you feel like is best at recognizing in film study what's happening? And then again, it goes back. A lot of it goes back to ball security. To answer the question, though, no, I don't think there's a lot of talent separation between those three guys. I mean, McLean Carter's a guy who won a state championship in high school at the 4A level.
Mm-hmm.
Duffy's a guy who played for a state title in high school at the 5A level. Forget exactly what Bowman's team did at Grapevine, but they were a playoff team.
Yes, they were.
And I was actually
played Abilene Cooper, if I'm not mistaken, during their run.
And I was actually looking back. He also has some bloodlines. We hadn't talked about this a lot, but, you know, Alan Bowman's dad played tight end at Penn State during the Joe Paterno years, so he's been around
football,
big-time college football before now. And, you know, I actually looked back, and maybe I had not really remembered this, but Alan Bowman's ranking and Jet Duffy's ranking as recruits was nearly identical. One was ranked like number 96 recruit in the state, and the other was number 97 recruit in the state. 2 different years, but they were literally ranked one spot apart on a state recruiting ranking.
And of course, one being a dual-threat quarterback, Jet Duffy, didn't have that much success in that state title game because I can't remember what the injury is, but it was a leg injury. He wasn't able to run, so that kind of limited him a little bit in terms of what he was able to do. And of course, Alan Bowman, more of a pro-style quarterback. Just before I kind of cut you off here, Don, Tom Jacobs just said, run a draw if you get good yards, try to get into field goal range. If not, you take the knee. The one thing I will say, if you try to run a play, you have the variable of maybe you fumble the ball. I'm not saying they would, but
I would, like I say, I would have probably thrown it up to Vasher there. Let him see if he can duplicate that 30-yard gain. And then if you get, say, they're 45 with 20 seconds left, you got a shot to get it into field goal range.
TJ Vasher, first rounder. Speaking of him, says Connor Davis, is he?
You know, before TJ Vasher had ever played a game for Tech. When he was a true freshman, I was standing out there at practice one day in August, and a Tech staff person, a football staff person, asked me, he said, who is Tech's next All-American? And he said, besides number 5.
Yeah.
And I thought, he was referring to Patrick Mahomes. He said, who is Tech's next All-American besides Patrick Mahomes, not counting Patrick Mahomes? And I'm kind of thinking, going, and he said, TJ Vasher. My question about TJ Vasher is, and I alluded to this a moment ago when we were talking about him, I'm not sure that he's not all that fast, or he doesn't seem to be all that fast, which I think would kind of limit his NFL draft projection. So to answer the question now, do I think he's an NFL first rounder? No. I think he is a guy who obviously has probably NFL. I think he has an NFL future. He'll certainly, get a shot in the NFL.
He has a skill set for sure.
I just, like I say, he doesn't strike me as a guy who's all that fast, and I think that could be a limiting factor in what his draft position turns out to be. 2 or 3 years down the road.
Chris Simic, again, I apologize if I say your name wrong. You can call me out on the Twitter. That's why it's live, or the Facebook. Join late. My bad if it's been discussed. Any comment on the lack of discipline demonstrated by the 2 ejections? This was demoralizing to fans, and probably demoralizing to the team too.
Yeah, we covered a little bit, but I'll kind of recap what I thought of it. I was more, if you're a Texas Tech fan, I think you should have been more dismayed and frustrated by the Seth Collins taunting foul. Than by the ejections, than by the targeting. And again, I go back to the Des Smith targeting penalty. You had a receiver running open 20 yards down the field. Third down play. You're trying to get a stop.
Play was away from him, too.
Des Smith is, 10 yards behind the play?
Give or take.
He is hustling, busting his butt to get back to an open receiver.
Doesn't know if the ball's coming.
Running with his back to the ball. I think he's aware the ball is coming. He's running with his back to the ball, and he hits the receiver high and gets targeting and ejected. I'm sympathetic to Des Smith in that situation because I think the rule is demanding that a player go from 90 miles an hour to 0 in a couple of steps. And I think that's putting an unfair burden on a defensive player, particularly in this day and age where there's so many talented skill position players in college football. You're at a disadvantage anyway, and I think there should be some leeway there. Did the officials call it right according to the book? Yeah, but I got a problem with with how that penalty is written, I think.
Mm-hmm. Kyle Carter. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and another person had asked, are the ramifications or the punishments for players committing penalties? Yes. I don't know what they are, but
I believe it's a half.
I mean, at different times they have been rolling. I'm
sorry. Yeah.
I'm talking about internal punishment. Yeah, different times there's been rolling, there's been running, there's been show up at 5 a.m. to get in a little extra work with the strength and conditioning staff. I'm not sure exactly what it is now, but there's pretty much always some kind of punishment for penalties, not just the 15-yard personal foul penalties, but things like false starts and that sort of thing.
Kyle Carter, since you're kind of bringing in bloodlines and kind of all that, McLean's brother is the great Tulsa great.
G.J. Kinney.
Yep, former Tulsa great. The only reason I know that is because they beat up on UTEP a lot.
Yeah, and he played a little bit in the NFL and then played in the CFL, I believe.
Yep, NFL in Canada, as Kyle Carter mentioned after that. This guy says don't try to pronounce the name. Did Cliff lose the team after one game? Is the air raid not existent at Texas Tech? I think this is overreaction after one game, frankly. But
here's the thing. I think the air raid is they're evolving away from the air raid. No, I don't think there's any question about that. When we're talking about
running the football,
when everybody's talking about
tight end,
running the football behind an all-veteran offensive line, using tight end and fullback. Mm-hmm. The air raid, they're evolving away from the air raid. I don't think there's any question about that.
Not only that, but you brought an offensive coordinator that doesn't necessarily go with the air raid, too, as you brought up a couple times.
Right. And, I think that's kind of how college football is getting. There aren't a whole lot of people running the Mike Leach offense. Even guys who came out of the Mike Leach coaching tree, like Dana Holgorsen, got away from the air raid way back when he was OC at Oklahoma State. Well, the first part of that question was?
Did he lose the team after 1 week?
I don't think so.
Neither do I. It's one game.
Plus, you got so much internal leadership on this team.
Yeah, you got a bunch of veteran guys, all that other stuff. Well, at least for right now, unless Brad tells me we have some more in the email, I think we're good on the questions. If you're good, Don.
I think I'm good.
It's been a nice 30 minutes, right?
We appreciate everybody. Great participation. Thanks for everybody for listening in and giving us a lot of conversation. Yeah, we'll do it again next week.
Absolutely. We'll do 4 p.m. Does 4 p.m. work for you? I know you got here a little bit later. So.
Here's what I said. I said I was scrambling at 3:30.
Yeah.
I didn't want to overlook questions that people had sent us. We asked you to send us questions,
and they did.
I feel like we should answer.
Gotcha. Well, we'll do this again at 4 p.m. next week. Of course, if you have any questions, you can always tweet us at AJ_Don Williams on Twitter and at CM Silva Jr. on Twitter. Of course, we're going to have all the coverage of Texas Tech throughout the week in the newspaper. Of course, today you can kind of check out the story on Jet Duffy and, of course, a notebook on the punters and special teams, along with some other deals that Don was able to dig up as well. Of course, our game day section comes out this weekend as well for Texas Tech as they host Lamar coming into this game. That's at 3 p.m. Saturday at Jones AT&T Stadium. Lamar's 1-0. Texas Tech is 0-1. The last game, Lamar won 70-7 over Kentucky Christian. Of course, Mississippi defeated Texas Tech 47-27. Last time those teams met, Texas Tech won 59-28 in 1988 at Lubbock. Do you remember that game, Don?
Vaguely. I was trying to remember if I covered that game. I think I was. It seems like I was there. I think I was.
This is kind of an inside joke. I just always ask because Don seems to
30
know
years
Tech.
ago.
Yeah.
30 years ago.
But, of course, we'll be there at the game. We'll be there at Jones AT&T Stadium. Check it out on RedRaiders.com, LubbockOnline.com, and then, of course, in the podcast form as well on Omni. Appreciate y'all watching. For Don Williams, I'm Carlos Silva, the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal. We'll see you next week.